So it looks like Persona 5 Scramble, or Persona 5 Strikers as it's being called in the West, is actually getting a Western release, and as I did with my Persona 5 Royal content, I will be bringing you tons of content based on my own experience having already played the game. For those new to the channel, I speak Japanese and often pick up and play Japanese games before their Western releases. I actually do this live over on my Twitch channel, linked in the video description if you're interested. With Scramble, I picked it up for its Japanese release and played through the entirety of the main story, as well as the post-game, completing all side quests in the game in just under 60 hours. For today's video, I want to go over everything there is to know about Persona 5 Scramble, the good and the bad, so that you can make an informed decision on whether or not this is a title that you should actually be interested in. Because, well, this game is probably a lot different than what you're expecting it to be. For starters, I should probably give a brief overview of what Persona 5 Scramble actually is for those who may not know. Originally, Scramble started out as a Persona Warriors game, akin to Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem Warriors, and whatnot. Basically, it was a Dynasty Warriors game with Persona characters. Somewhere along the lines though, it morphed into something that tried to be more of an even blend between Dynasty Warriors and Persona. Chronologically, Scramble is a direct sequel to the original Persona 5, taking place 4 months after the original game's ending during Joker and his teammates' summer break. I'll talk about the game's story in a later part of the video, but rest assured I will be as spoiler-free as I possibly can when we get there. But first, let's talk about one of the core parts of the game that you'll be spending a lot of time with: combat. At its core, Persona 5 Scramble uses the Dynasty Warriors combat system. You have standard attacks and special attacks that can be used in various combinations to perform combos and combo finishers, with combo finishers seeing the character bringing out their persona to use one of their persona's signature abilities. Alternatively, you can also hold the R1 button down to slow down time and open up a menu where you can select a specific ability for your equipped persona to use, and both methods have advantages and disadvantages. For example, using persona abilities via combo finishers costs no SP, but what abilities are used for a given combo are preset and you can't alter them. And abilities used this way will see their potency significantly reduced, whereas if you bring up the menu to use an ability, you'll be able to spend SP or HP on that ability, but the potency will be exponentially higher. For example, an early game Dia cast as a combo finisher may only heal you for 10 HP, while that same Dia cast through the menu could heal you for well over 100 HP. This is an important distinction to make because many enemies you encounter will have a number of shields below their HP bar that need to be broken in order to deal meaningful damage to them. And in order to break shields, you must be hitting those enemies with either critical hits or their weakness. However, the amount of damage done to those shields is directly proportional to how much damage the attack used actually does. Once a shield is broken, the enemy will be temporarily stunned, allowing you to do a follow-up attack. And once all shields on an enemy have been broken, you can then use an all-out attack on them for massive damage. Aside from your standard combos and persona abilities, each party member also has a mechanic unique to them. For example, Joker can use his gun in battle, Morgana can temporarily transform into his car form to run into enemies, Ann can imbue her melee damage with fire, etc. As you fight in battle, you will also be slowly building up a showtime gauge that once full will allow you to unleash a powerful showtime attack. Unlike with Persona 5 Royal's showtime attacks, Scrambles are solo attacks and not random. Another form of attack provided to you in Scramble is through the environment. In most battles, there will be objects that your character can jump to, such as on top of a car or a light post, and from there you can then interact with that object to deal damage to enemies. Finally, on the defensive side of things, your options are pretty limited. There is no blocking or parrying in Scramble, so reducing damage comes down to using your dash button to dodge attacks, applying buffs and debuffs to reduce incoming damage, or swapping to a persona that is strong against the enemy's attacks. Sadly, this is not something that your party members can do, so if you run into an enemy that can hit their weakness, well, they're pretty much screwed. And this is actually a good lead-in to some of my core issues with Scramble's combat, one of which almost caused me to quit the game multiple times. First is that your party members are incredibly stupid, and they really love to stand in bad. Because of this, if you aren't bringing members into a dungeon who have no weaknesses to the enemies you'll be facing, they will likely die often. And sadly, once you've chosen the 3 members to bring with you, the only way to change them is to go back to a save point and return to the beginning of a dungeon. Continuing on with your party members, the game doesn't really provide any real incentive to use anyone other than Joker. You can switch between Joker and the other 3 party members that you bring with you, but outside of using their showtimes, there really isn't a reason to. In fact, you're almost incentivized not to switch simply due to how powerful Joker is, since he can use multiple persona. Another big issue with Scramble's combat is that there are too many actions you can take in battle, and not enough controller real estate to accommodate those actions. As a result, multiple actions end up being mapped to the same button. Did you just use half of your SP to break a shield on a tough enemy so that you could temporarily stun it and get a follow-up attack? Well, you better hope there aren't any objects on the battlefield you are capable of moving to, otherwise you're at the mercy of the game making that decision for you. I literally had numerous instances in which my character would jump to an object that wasn't even in my camera view instead of performing a follow-up attack on an enemy simply because those actions use the exact same button. But the real issue is with game balance, and I'm not talking about the difficulty. You see, Scramble is an action game with Dynasty Warriors combat and mechanics, but the Persona elements, specifically the amount of SP available to the player and the cost of abilities, remains balanced around the turn-based combat of Persona 5, where you could get away with using only a small amount of SP per battle. This isn't the case in Scramble, where you regularly need to use large amounts of SP to simply break enemy shields, something you often need to do multiple times per battle. This is a major issue because for a large chunk of the game, the only reliable way to restore your SP is to leave the dungeon and come back in, which, mind you, takes 4 loading screens. The alternative is to just continue with no SP, but in those cases, battles with shielded enemies end up taking upwards of 30 minutes. Because of this, your progress through much of the early game ends up being a complete slog, consisting of finding a teleport point after each battle so that you can leave the dungeon and come back in, all while hoping you don't run into the respawned enemies. In Persona 5 Scramble, you will be traveling to various cities around Japan and then entering into each area's dungeon, which are called jails in this game, with the hope of stopping the jail's king. Each jail is themed around its king and the city in which it takes place, but to actually gain access to a jail, you must first gather the necessary information. In order to do this, you simply just need to walk around the 1 or 2 areas in each city that are actually available for you to access, all the while talking to basically everyone to fill up a progress bar, after which you will be able to enter that area's jail. The cities themselves look nice and have great music, but outside of the initial information gathering section and a few sparse shops, there really isn't much to do in them. Instead, you'll be spending far more time in menus inside the RV your party travels in and inside the jails. Speaking of the RV, this is where you will do the majority of your shopping, as well as accepting side quests, cooking food, and entering the Velvet Room, but more on that later. It's also where you will go to enter jails after your initial visit. The jails in Scramble are broken up into several areas of varying sizes, and offer up a fair bit of verticality with regards to how you traverse them. Generally speaking, you will be tasked with going to a handful of specific areas in the jails in order to gain access to a central section of the jail itself. Once you've gained access to this central section and made your way to the Jail King's area, you will then need to leave the jail for story reasons so that you can get a key to actually confront the king. Sound familiar? As you explore the jail, enemy shadows will be patrolling the map, and going up and attacking them will trigger a fight, much like with standard Persona titles, except that the actual battle is a Dynasty Warriors one on an extremely small scale. Now, you can ambush enemies, which will give you a free all-out attack at the beginning of battle, but sadly the ability to do this is very finicky and another case of assigning multiple actions to the same button. In this case, shooting your gun and ambushing an enemy are the same, which once again puts you at the mercy of the game as to which one actually happens most of the time. Then there is the inconsistency with regards to hiding. Sometimes you can lean up against a wall in order to wait for an ambush, but other times you can't. And unlike with Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, where this was actually pretty much a key feature, it feels almost tacked on in Scramble. That being said, the jails do look awesome, with great music and unique aesthetics. And I genuinely enjoyed running around the jails, at least on subsequent visits. This is probably a good time to mention that even after you complete a jail, you can go back to it at any time to complete side quests and whatnot. Cities, however, are different, as once you leave a city you can't go back, not that there's really much reason to do so. Anyways, why did I specifically say I enjoyed jails on subsequent visits? Well, that's because this game seeks to redefine the meaning of handholding. The game tells you everything: how to solve puzzles, what doors to go into next, how to beat bosses. Almost nothing is left to the player to figure out. In fact, the analogy I always used while I was streaming the game was that the game basically puts the player in a straitjacket, shackles them to a baby stroller, and then shoves a pacifier in their mouth. Oh, and you better believe there are, and I'm being scientifically accurate here, a metric ton of tutorials. Now, I'm going to be brief with this one so as to avoid spoilers, but there are a few things that need to be talked about. As mentioned earlier, the game takes place 4 months after the original Persona 5 during the cast's summer break. Through a series of events, you find out that the metaverse, which should no longer exist, somehow still does, after which you find yourself essentially being blackmailed by the government into figuring out why, with the consequences of failing to do so being that the Phantom Thieves take the blame for any wrongdoings and get thrown in jail. This basically serves as the catalyst for why your character's summer break turns into a road trip around Japan. Now, in general, I don't mind the basic premise of the story. I kind of figured they'd do something like bring back the metaverse anyways. The issues for me are the individual story beats at each major story junction. Speaking broadly to avoid spoilers, you essentially repeat a lot of the same story beats and character growth that already happened in the original Persona 5. I would even go so far as to say that after the conclusion of the first jail story arc, anyone who played Persona 5 will be able to predict the majority of what's going to happen in Scramble. With Persona 5 Royal, that game's third semester and new story elements built upon the foundation of Persona 5. But with Persona 5 Scramble, it basically just reuses it. That's not to say that the story is bad or anything, it really isn't, but it is a bit disappointing, especially coming after Persona 5 Royal. What wasn't disappointing though were the new characters. Being a sequel, there are obviously a number of new characters that your party interacts with, and among those, 2 of them are new Phantom Thieves. And personally, it was these 2 new Phantom Thieves that were one of the major highlights for the game. Both were interesting and well developed, and the dialogue, especially with one of them, was downright hilarious at times. Now, we can't really talk about characters in a Persona title without talking about the social elements, right? So unfortunately, I have some bad news for those of you who really enjoy the social elements in Persona titles, as they are basically non-existent in Scramble. The social link or confidant system? Gone. Romances? Gone. Daily schedule and time management? Also gone. Confidants besides your main party from Persona 5? Mostly gone. You do get to see Sojiro at the beginning of the game, and Sai also makes an appearance later in the story, though it is shown from her point of view so the developers didn't even bother to model her character. But as for the rest of your confidants from Persona 5, they make no appearance whatsoever, with only a few being mentioned briefly in passing. Also, I think it goes without saying, but Persona 5 Scramble doesn't read your Persona 5 save file, so any relationships you may have had with one of the party members essentially never happened. The replacement you get for all of those social elements being gone is the band system. After doing pretty much anything in the game, you will receive some band experience points, and after accumulating enough experience for your band level, it will go up. Gaining a band level provides you with band points that can be spent on a perk system, allowing you to gain access to the ability to open previously locked chests, gain more experience from battle, and more. It's an alright system, but I wish some of the perks you gained actually made a difference. There are some that are genuinely powerful, but most really aren't all that noticeable. The sound design for Scramble is easily one of its biggest strengths. There are obviously tracks from Persona 5, but also a bunch of new ones specifically made for Scramble, as well as a handful of remixes of old favorites. And of course, the voice acting of the Japanese cast is top-notch. My only real complaint, and one that hopefully won't be an issue for the Western release, is the audio balancing. At some points, either the music was so loud or the characters were so quiet that certain characters became almost inaudible during story scenes, and sadly there are no options available to adjust the different sound levels individually. One thing though that Scramble did with regards to sound that I hope they bring into future Persona releases has to deal with battle music. Specifically, you can now select what song you want to have playing during battle, or you can have it rotate between a select few of your favorites. This is a feature that is awesome, and I really want them to put it in future titles. Being a Persona game, naturally you will be acquiring Persona and will gain access to the Velvet Room. For Scramble, you no longer need to negotiate with Persona to acquire them. Instead, you have a chance of obtaining them after battle as battle rewards. You can then take those Persona to the Velvet Room, where you can register them to your compendium and fuse them together to make stronger Persona. Unfortunately though, this is another system similar to the social elements that has taken a pretty big hit. Unlike with Persona 5, you can no longer sacrifice Persona to one another in order to pass down skills. So outside of skill cards, which aren't very common, your only means of making Persona with specific abilities is through fusion. Another area that was hit was the overall number of Persona available in the game. When compared to Persona 5, Scramble contains less than a third of the total number of Persona than the original game. And as someone who really enjoys filling out the compendium and making strong Persona in each title, this was a pretty big letdown. Though, despite the mostly gutted system, there was one new element added to the Velvet Room and Persona growth, known as Persona Points. Essentially, these are points that are earned whenever you fuse a Persona away, or whenever you receive one that you already own from battle rewards. You can use these points in order to increase the level of a specific persona or increase their individual stats. And it's this system that happens to be a core component of the method used to easily make Persona with 99 in all stats. Subscribe if you want to get notified when my guide for how to do that comes out. Finally, I wanted to close this video out with a few miscellaneous things that didn't really fit into any of the earlier sections. First, a couple of annoyances that may or may not be in the Western release, as they were eventually patched out in the Japanese version. One has to do with the removal of the ability to have dialogue and cutscenes auto-progress. This was annoying because some story scenes in between major story sections can last upwards of almost 2 hours. The other one was the removal of the ability to sell off junk items in bulk. So unlike in Persona 5, where you could hit an option to sell off all of your junk items that you collected in mementos or in a palace, in Scramble you had to sell them off all individually. Like I said, these features were eventually added, but that wasn't until a few months after the game's initial release. But hopefully for the Western release, you won't have to deal with this. The next thing I wanted to talk about is with regards to post-game content and New Game Plus, as I do usually get a lot of questions about these in the games that I cover. After you beat the game, a number of new quests that pit you against difficult Persona become available, and they are necessary in order to fill out the compendium. Complete every side quest in the game, including the ones added after completing the story, and you will be able to fight the Reaper. And defeating the Reaper will allow you to access a special difficulty option only available on New Game Plus, Risky. Once on New Game Plus, a few things will change or become available to you. For starters, you'll have access to both of the new characters from the very beginning, even though story-wise they won't have joined you yet. You will also be able to buy new items from the shop, and if you are playing on Risky, you will be able to acquire each character's best weapon. Finally, the last thing that becomes available on New Game Plus is the ability to fuse the final Persona. Well, that about does it. This was quite a bit longer than my usual videos, but there was a lot to cover as well. As I did with my Persona 5 Royal coverage, I will be putting out videos going more in depth on a number of topics related to Scramble, as well as putting out guides on how to fuse powerful Persona, how to easily max the stats of any Persona, how to grind levels, and more. So be sure to subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss out on any of that. And as always, if you have any questions, do feel free to ask in the comment section below. Until next time, take care.